director questions through the chair. Senator Roberts, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for appearing today. Just to clarify, I looked up the definition of regime. It includes the government of the day. So, Senator Watt, you are part of the Albanese regime. And Mr.
You've got questions?
Yes, I have. Mr. Pizzullo, I just wanted to clarify that. Mr. Pizzullo, counter-terrorism is important. I want to say that up front. Extremists can pose a threat. I want to say that up front. But labelling and categorising people, anti-vax, etc., that is not okay. What has been the arrangement between Home Affairs and social media platforms to intervene or censor or block posts that were or are contrary to government policy related to COVID-19? Was it purely being the conduit from the Department of Health to the media platforms?
And also making judgments against the platform's own policies. But to answer the Senator's question, I said earlier that we're not the arbiters of health science. So can you describe what might have triggered action on the part of our staff to start to draft up a referral, for instance? Ms Hawkins.
So, Senator, in terms of the way I was answering the previous Senator's question, I would say to you that the government was concerned about instances of harmful mis and disinformation in relation to COVID. This line of effort was set up in 2020. As the Secretary has said, it came out of the fact that we had been doing referrals in relation to terrorist, violent and extremist content. And as I understand the Secretary's evidence in terms of having conversations with the Department of Health early in the piece about the fact that we could use that same kind of mechanism to provide referrals about harmful mis and disinformation in relation to COVID. We could use a similar technique that we had been using in the context of terrorist, violent and extremist content. We could use that same kind of technique in relation to harmful mis and disinformation in the context of COVID. So, for example, in relation to Facebook's policies on mis and disinformation, we scanned the environment, we identified where there were harmful instances of mis and disinformation in relation to COVID, and then we provided those referrals to platforms such as Facebook for them to determine against their own policy about not allowing COVID mis and disinformation on their platforms. So in relation to their own policy, we then made referrals to say, you might want to look at these posts because in the context of your own policy about not having COVID mis and disinformation on your platform. So that's what we have been doing since 2020, and as the Secretary said earlier, we will finish doing that on the 30th of June this year.
So, Mr. Pizzullo, your department has been a conduit between the Department of Health and Meta and other platforms, and those platforms have been funded by Big Pharma to shut down posts that call any questions about the COVID-19 injections. So you're actually aiding and abetting censorship of relevant and scientifically correct information, because as Senator Antic pointed out, much of what was called information, labelled information, by people like Meta, is now found to be correct and true. So you aided and abetted in the injection of Australians and led to 30,000 excess deaths in 2022.
Senator Roberts, do you have a question?
Yes, I did.
That's what the officials are here to do, is to answer your questions.
You were a conduit from the Department of Health to Meta and other platforms. Are you a conduit for any other departments? And do you follow their instructions just like you follow the Department of Health?
Well, on the question of health, conduit might not be the right phrase, because that would imply that an action was initiated in the Department of Health, sent to us as, if you like, a clearinghouse and then on-forwarded. I think the evidence that you've heard is that in order to relieve the Department of Health at the time when we were dealing with the front end of a public health crisis, is that we stepped into that breach to say, look, we've got the capability, just as long as we can understand from ATAGI and others what the broad parameters are of health information that the public should be advised of versus harmful information. We'll run with that, and we put in place a program that allowed us to do that. As to your characterisation of the COVID response, the efficacy of vaccines, you made reference to Australians being injected. I would really ask you to direct those questions to the Department of Health.
I will be.
I'm sure you will be, but they're better qualified to give you a better view, certainly, than I can about the efficacy of that advice. So we're not a health department. We don't have sort of an independent way of saying to
So you're a conduit?
Well, conduit, again, I'll just repeat what I said.
You take orders from the Department of Health?
A conduit implies that there's an action catalysed, initiated in one department, comes through a middle broker such as ourselves and ends up with Facebook. Other than the policy settings being made known to us by the Department of Health, this was an area of action, like so many other things in the early days of COVID, where we didn't need any instructions. We were just told to get on with a function, which we performed, and occasionally there'd be engagement with health to make sure that we weren't operating off obsolete information.
So you were just told to do it. Who was the service provider advising you on what was and wasn't misinformation?
Well, we use the service provider to do the scanning, do we not? That's right.
That's right. Senator, the service provider that we have used is M&C Saatchi.
Who do the scanning?
Who do the scanning.
They're not sort of scientific advisors as such.
So they're scanning the platforms and they are then providing us with proposed referrals that they consider are in breach of the platform's own policy on mis and disinformation in relation to COVID. And then there would be staff in my team who would consider that, and then after considering Saatchi's proposed referrals, then we would decide whether or not to pass it on to the platform.
So who is Saatchi and how do you spell it?
Saatchi.
I think it's MC.
So they're scanners.
M&C Saatchi.
M&C, isn't it?
They're scanners. So is it not true that it was said in past Senate estimates that Home Affairs considers that a significant threat to Australia is that of domestic terrorism?
I'm sorry, Senator.
Isn't it true that in past Senate estimates, Home Affairs has said that it considers a significant threat to Australia as that of domestic terrorism?
Most certainly. That's one of the key risks that we seek to manage, yes.
Do you consider that those who would challenge the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccinations are domestic terrorists if they challenge government policy?
Not if it wasn't associated with any extremism, politically motivated violence or planning to attack institutions of society, no.
Do you consider that those senators who have posted comments opposed to the COVID-19 mandated vaccines, injections, are domestic terrorists?
That senators?
Yes.
You can post whatever you like, Senator. I mean, you've got the privilege of being a senator.
I'm pleased that you can. You just said I can post whatever I like, but Meta and so will not let people like Senator Antic, myself, Senator.
Well, if they with their own service conditions take your post down, then you can deal with them as a elected representative, and if you want to contest their takedown, then feel free. You don't.
Are you aware of any social media posts by elected members of this Senate that have been secretly censored through this arrangement?
I have no advice or information on that.
Interfered with in any way?
I don't know.
Limited in reach, not just censored, but limited in reach, so we can get to fewer people.
A posting by a member of the House or the Senate, I don't know. And I will check that in the when we come back to Senator Antic, will I be surprised to learn that there were any referrals that related to a member of Parliament?
I hope not.
I'll check, but I'm rather thinking I won't be surprised.
Are you aware of any posts by members of Parliament that were taken down as a result of your actions?
Well, that was a side discussion I just had. I don't even know that we made any referrals that related to parliamentarians, but
I'd have to take it on notice, Senator.
I'd be surprised and verging on disappointed if we had.
Could you find out in particular if Home Affairs has been involved with or responsible for any of the posts that have been taken down off my media pages and also restricted in any way?
We will. That's in effect a subset of the question asked by Senator Antic, but we'll make a particular effort to check, because I'm interested as well, because there are questions of privilege that I'd be much more respectful of than Facebook might be, and it might well be that if we have made such a referral, it's something that I'll need to reflect on, but I'll check. In fact, why don't I come back to you directly in relation to your own personal circumstances on notice?
Thank you. We've been several MPs in both the Senate and the House of Representatives have been heavily censored for posting material that was classified by social media platforms as misinformation and is now found to be true?
Well, I've got nothing to... I don't know. The latter part of your... the assertion in what might have been a question, I'm not quite sure, but I just don't have any basis for thinking something that was considered to be misinformation at the time under social media policies have now, through some kind of scientific evolution, be considered to be true. I just don't know.
Senator Roberts, would you mind just clarifying who it is that you say has found these comments to have been true?
The government itself, Pfizer has admitted itself that the COVID injections are not safe and effective, yet the government, the previous regime under Morrison, said that they were safe and effective. They are neither effective nor safe. They are negative efficacy, and that's proven.
That's always been your opinion, but I'm wondering which authority you're pointing to that has deemed that
Pfizer vice presidents.
Pfizer vice presidents
Pfizer vice
say
presidents.
that it's not.
To ask a senator a question.
One of your senators was asking about this as well.
No, a minister's directing questions to a senator. I don't think that's the usual order.
Well, I mean, when an assertion is
Mr.
made
Mr. Pizzullo,
that things are true.
Are you aware that...
Senators, I think the minister's actually trying to assist Senator Roberts, as I think most of us do. If we can... Senator Roberts...
Well, if an assertion is going to be made that something is untrue, I think someone...
Minister, I'm speaking. Thank you. Senator, you have one last question, and then I have to hand over the call to Senator Patterson.
Can you check this afternoon?
How many other senators have had their media posts censored through these arrangements? Could you get back to me on that one as well, please?
I will, as a further subset to the question taken on notice from Senator Antich, make a particular point of checking whether any referrals related to members of the House or the Senate.
Okay, my final question is...
Inclusive of you, but others as well.
Yes, thank you. Minister, if senators have had their media posts censored by Home Affairs being a conduit to Meta and other platforms, then I call for a full royal commission to get to the bottom of this gross breach of freedom of speech at the highest level. And the Labor Party itself...
I'm so sorry, Senator. I missed the first part of your question.
I don't think it was a question.
The Minister... The Labor Party has already said, Anthony Albanese said before the election that he committed to a royal commission. Will we now have a Labor Party royal commission?
Well, the whole thing is based on a hypothetical about whether senators or MPs have had their social media interfered with. Let's wait and see what the answer to that question is. But let's continue the questioning with Professor Rennick.
Senator Roberts, thank you very much. Senator, just one moment.
Well, I don't spread COVID misinformation.